AskReddit by Prince Surprised Pat. Lawyers of Reddit, what was your hold it moment where you knew you would win? Not a lawyer, but got robbed at gunpoint in my home. Long story short, he would have gone to prison anyway, but the kicker is that the shoes he wore to court were the same shoes he stole from my house. Judge asked if I wanted them back. I said yes. Judge made him take them off in court and walk back in socks. Donated the shoes. It was more about the principle. Leaving the courthouse with a new pair of old shoes is something most haven't done. I had a client charged with battery. The alleged victim didn't really support the prosecution's case and in any event was reluctant to testify. They still had another witness though, and she said that my client was hitting the alleged victim, so it wasn't looking great. The prosecutor and I were talking before court started, hanging out by the courtroom doors, when the witness walked in. She looked right at my client, who was sitting not 5 feet from me, then scanned the room and said, "Where is client?" Named the prosecutor and I looked at each other for a minute, and then he said he needed to check on something. When I saw him a few minutes later, he told me he was dismissing the case. I don't understand. It was the wrong person? My client was riding his motorcycle on a relatively calm street when this guy exited his garage, without looking, and ran over him. In deposition, the guy brought a witness that was with him on the passenger seat. The whole time, the witness maintained that my client was driving too fast and that there was no time to brake the car. I asked him the same question a few times in different ways, making him tell the story again. In the fourth telling, he, already a bit frustrated, let it slip. "Look, I've already told you. We were exiting the garage and, as soon as I lifted up from getting my cell phone on the car's carpet, wait. So you didn't even see the crash?" There was no coming back from that. At this moment he knew, he fucked up. Parent termination case I was prosecuting. Dad went on how he has changed his life around and worked the AA program. Asked him what step he was on, and he proudly proclaimed 3. Asked him what step 3 is, he had no idea. Then asked him step 2 was. Again, no idea. Parental rights terminated. Got really concerned for a second there that you were terminating parents, and not their parental rights. Edit, my most upvoted comment is about thinking a lawyer was killing parents. Can't say I'm surprised lol. When I practiced insurance defense. Was handed a file to take over of a slip and fall. Guy tripped on a hose, tore his ACL. The partner had taken the guy's depo already, so I read the transcript. I'm a Michigan football fan, watched every game for 20 years. This guy testified he was the starting safety for a certain rival for certain years. Also that he graduated with a double major that doesn't exist at that school. I immediately knew this was false. Partner didn't understand. Dug deeper, lied about so much stuff unrelated to the fall for no reason. Eventually found high school records from football injuries of head trauma, knee injuries, and a slip and fall injury a few months after ours. He also testified he rehabbed an ACL surgery after 1 month. Motion for fraud on the court filed, immediately settled. I really don't understand the people who lie about finite experiences. Like, wanna tell everybody you went to the park? Go for it, millions of people do that. Tell everybody you played for Purdue? Not the same deal. Not a lawyer, but I'm currently in a custody battle. Mother is saying I can't be trusted because I've been refusing to take our child to the therapist. The therapist testified I couldn't bring our child in because therapy must have both parents' consent, and mother has retracted consent. Your Honor, he won't bring our child to a therapist because he can't. And why is that? Because, Your Honor, I won't let him. Very abbreviated, I was prosecuting a convenience store owner for luring a young girl, who regularly came into the store, back to part of the store to grope, fondle and kiss her, child enticement. It was the only section of the store without surveillance camera coverage. They were in the back room for about 2 minutes and 17 seconds, per the timestamp on the videos. Of the many arguments the defense put on, one was there was no way there was enough time for anything to happen. In my rebuttal on closing, I asked the jury to imagine what could happen in the room in that amount of time, and I asked them to all close their eyes while I timed out 2 minutes and 17 seconds on my watch, in silence. After about 60 seconds, 2 of the jurors started crying. Knew it was going to be guilty right then. Deleted. Sued a former employer for $3,500 in unpaid wages. It was a slam dunk. Had a letter stating what my salary would be versus pay stubs that were less, so I didn't bother getting a lawyer to save on fees. Turns out the company thought they could try the same strategy. I show up to court and the manager of the local office is there with an affidavit from the CEO saying he's allowed to represent the company in court. The judge asks him, "Are you an attorney?" "No, just an employee." A company can't have pro se representation. Judge immediately ruled in my favor. Felt fucking fantastic. I worked on a case involving defective processors. In discovery we got emails from the defendant's engineers that had worked on the processors. They were in a nation country but the emails were in English because they were going to us executives. One of the more senior engineers basically laid out the exact defect we were suing over, explaining what the problem was and why it was their fault, and finishing with "This is big problem, we ship crap to customer." Needless to say we hit them over the head with that in mediation, and they settled shortly after. One of the results of language differences is that when you are trying to communicate an idea and you are not confidently fluent, you avoid nuance and try for clarity. Referring to the problem as "we ship crap to customer" is about as clear as it gets. My mom hit a guy on a bike with her car in a parking lot. She claimed he hit her. She also wanted to counter-sue the cyclist for scaring her. In her deposition she started every sentence with "when I hit him." One of my friends got hit by a car when crossing the street, in a crosswalk, on foot. This was back when we were in high school. The guy tried to sue him for the damages to his car. At one point the lawyer called up my friend's mom and asked for the son's insurance information and pictures of the damage of her son's car. She explained that my friend was on foot, and the lawyer just went silent for a bit. He said, "I need to speak with my client," and hung up. He called back a few minutes later and told her that she wouldn't be hearing about this again. Edited for clarity. Obligatory, not mine but my mom's story. She was fighting for custody on behalf of the father, trying to prove that the kids were living in subpar conditions with their drug addict mother in spite of the ample child support provided. It was a tough case because courts are so hesitant to pull kids away from their moms. Then the mom burst out that she had been feeding the kids cat food as proof that she wouldn't let them starve. Needless to say, the judge didn't take that as a good reason for the kids to stay with their mom. Wait, did you say cat food? When I compared the scanned copy of the deed provided by the other side's lawyers to the original my client eventually got around to providing. The scanned copy provided by the other side had a witness signature. The original did not. Deleted. At a restraining order trial it was essentially my client's word versus his, regarding a sexual assault. He did a good job dressing up and acting very appropriate during most of his testimony. But then he was asked a series of open-ended questions and he said something to the effect that, "She kept coming up on me with that fucking pussy," allegedly during a lecture, and as soon as he said it a look came on his face and the judge's face and everyone knew the ruse of respectable young gentleman had failed. I won. Good job. That's what a good lawyer does, get them talking and they usually win the case for you. My client was accused of brutally murdering a dog. Cop testified that there was no testing of the blood, no body ever found, and admitted it could have, in fact, run away. The eyewitness said she could see the killing down the hallway from the dining room. Cop testified there was no hallway and the dining room was on a different level of the house than the killing supposedly took place. Then the person who was leading the lynch mob against my client around town for the last year testified that she had been in the apartment between the two visits by the cop to evaluate the scene. No body, a compromised crime scene, witness who couldn't see anything, and admission that there was no proof the dog was dead. Closing argument lasted 3 seconds. Your Honor, I'm asking for an acquittal. Edit. My first award, thanks. For those who asked, this was in Canada and received a fair bit of media attention prior to trial. Who fabricates bullshit like this? What do people gain from it? I trapped a defendant pretty badly one time. He testified in a depot he had a green arrow for his left turn and that my client ran the red. Unfortunately for him, the additional turn lane arrow was installed 2 months after the wreck. Case settled for policy limits a week later. Not a court case, but your story reminds me of an accident I was a passenger in. A woman illegally turned at an intersection. There was a sign for turn on arrow only, and hit the car I was in as we were crossing through. We pulled into a nearby parking lot and were exchanging information. The woman was freaking out and in tears and me and the driver were just standing there uncomfortable. An uninvolved person saw that and apparently seeing the woman crying and two big guys there decided that meant we were bullying her. She comes up and starts screaming at the driver and says she's a witness and it's all his fault for running a green light, aka driving through the intersection. I was reviewing the transcript of an interview with a child. The child made incriminating statements against my client. At one point, when discussing the allegations, the child used an odd word, but I didn't think much of it. A few days later, I was watching a video of the child interacting with their grandmother, who hates my client, from about a week before that interview. The grandmother used the exact same odd word in the exact context the child later used it. At that moment, it became clear that child had been coached. It was the first real aha moment of my career. My blood boils when people coach children and use them in this way. You are a disgusting pose to use a child like this. No one ever knows if a child is lying or telling the truth moving forward, which makes them so vulnerable. And the kid themselves just is destroyed by the lie. Sometimes they start to believe the lie. People suck. When I found a video on Facebook of the plaintiff squatting 300 pounds a month before his deposition. That was a good one. Oh, he was saying he couldn't work and had back injuries after a minor car accident. Edit. Just as a follow-up, I sent the video to his attorney afterward the deposition and the case immediately went away. He also adamantly denied being able to work out or doing any lifting during his deposition. It was a big lie. Also, I agree that this really sucks for the people with legitimate injuries, who people quickly want to just label litigious. These sorts of people make my blood boil. My dad hurt his back badly when I was a kid and it took him years to be totally pain-free and have full movement even now, like 20-25 years later his back isn't 100%. My client has been keeping her son away from the father because the father has a new child. She is concerned that her son will act violently towards the new child and she could be held liable. Judge, that's not even a defense. Man, this sounds like a really sad family situation for the older half-brother. Sounds like his mom is pissed that his dad has moved on, so she refuses to cooperate and wants her kid to hate his dad and the new baby. Not exactly a you would win moment, but I got a hidden shout out from a federal judge in a ruling that I consider to be one of the high points of my career. Here's what happened. Before a hearing for an emergency injunction against USDA, I was watching the hearing before mine, a trademark infringement case. At the end of that hearing, the judge accidentally used a pun, and could not stop laughing. She was literally crying. I decided at that moment I was going to intentionally use a pun in my hearing. I did accused USDA of engaging in a shell game by illegally diverting some federal funds to an egg industry trade group. The judge called me on it, but laughed heartily. My client won. The judge threatened to put the Secretary of Agriculture in jail. A major newspaper reporting on the case said the judge winced at my puns but agreed with my arguments. False. When th. This ladies and gentlemen and everyone else, is why you brush up on your pun game. Not a lawyer, but was working as a paralegal for a law firm. We were defending a claim which had run into tens of thousands of pounds against our client, a holiday home, by a woman who had tripped over a speed bump while walking back to her caravan, and damaged her knee. The fall was genuine. The question was whose fault this was. She claimed it was the holiday home's fault because she hadn't seen the speed bump due to low lighting, poor marking, etc. The claim had, outrageously, gone to months, and made it to court. Going through the various questions to her, when our barrister asked how she knew the speed bump was poorly marked, or something similar. Her response, well, I remember thinking how it wasn't well marked when I was walking up to it. Needless to say, it was a short day in court after that point. What does she mean? This means she saw it, distracted by her own thoughts, of it wasn't well marked, and tripped herself. I clerk for a judge and we had a low-level thief in our courtroom who had robbed one of his neighbor's houses in the winter in Colorado, and all the police had to do was follow the footsteps back to his house where he was hanging out with the stolen items and a small amount of drugs and a shitty handgun. Idiot. Edited for clarity. We had a local guy call the cops and claim his truck was stolen. Found shortly after crashed through a fence into a pole. Footprints in the snow led right to his front door. Somehow he knew the right people and got away with it. Not during trial. Happened to me personally. I got into a car accident. Another driver crashed into my car. The driver was such an asshole, talking tough, blaming me, saying that he knew a bunch of lawyers, and here's the kicker, he threatened that he was going to take me to court. I'm a laid-back dude in contrast, and I was cordial to him. We went to the police station and made our statements to the traffic investigator. I didn't have a dashcam at the time, but a day later I got a copy of the CCTV footage that was looking directly at the scene of the accident. I showed the investigator the video, and he was absolutely stunned how wrong the other guy was. At that point, I told the investigator that I was an attorney, and that I'd decide if I wanted to take the matter to court. Following day, I got a call from the guy who hit me. Apparently, he said he also saw the CCTV footage, and he had called to settle things. I was just shocked because this dude, who was previously Mr. Alpha Male, did a total 180 and was suddenly polite and respectful. Amazing what an impact video has. Deleted. Okay, so I was drafting a defense to an accident case statement of claim, and when I read through it, all the details were wrong. They got the insurers, our client, wrong, the wrong license plate, driver, date, time. Everything was wrong. So I told my clerk to call their firm up to inform them of their mistake. When she got patched through to the lawyer screamed down the phone and left my clerk in tears. Said that they, lawyer, don't have time to be speaking to clerks and to get a real lawyer to call them back. That pissed us off. So we went along with it. Went for dismissal and got filing fees. Overall didn't cost our client a cent. Watched my lawyer have this moment last time we were in court. Short version, my ex abused my kid. I withheld visitation and hired a lawyer. I offered supervised visitation with a plan to integrate regular visitation once he completed anger management and parenting classes, as well as had 6 months clean of all substances. When he was on the stand, he mentioned that he had been taking prescription meds for 10 years, to illustrate that he's been on meds for a decade and never had a problem being a good dad. Lawyer asked what meds, and he listed off a bunch. Meds like methadone, Klonopin, Vicodin, OxyContin, etc. She asked why he began taking those particular medications. He replied, well, I messed up my back last year riding my quad. She asked him to repeat himself. He said it again. The look on her face was amazing. She said, so, you've been taking large amounts of meds for 10 years? He said yes. She said 10 years of major medications due to an injury that happened 2 years ago? TL. Dr. Judge agreed with my request for supervised visits pending his completion of all the necessary steps. X never completed any steps and kiddo hasn't had to see him in 4 years. I had a ton of these when I used to do family law. Off the top of my head, my client's husband was alleging she had been high and nude in public. As I'm crossing him, I get him to admit that she was in fact changing out of her bathing suit at the beach and covered by a towel at all times. He says, well, she was naked, under the towel. I come back with, just like you're naked under your clothes right now. Even the judge chuckled. Not a lawyer. Was contesting a speeding ticket. In front of the judge, it went like this. Judge Mr. Crookie, you were given a ticket for doing 40 in a 30 area that's also a school zone on Turnpike Road. How do you plead? Me, Your Honor, there is no school zone on Turnpike Road. The judge looks at the paper again, then looks at the bailiff. There isn't a school zone there, is there? Bailiff, no judge, not to my recollection. Judge HMM. Well, I guess you're free to go, Mr. Crookie. Have a nice night. In case you didn't know, if the officer writes up the ticket incorrectly, it has to be thrown out entirely. Also, I don't think the officer was trying to get me on extra charges on purpose. There was one of those signs at the top of a hill that warns of a bus stop over the crest of the hill. Think he just got confused. Deleted. I went to a family lawyer for a consult. Broke into tears as she sat down and started telling her about 11 weeks of harassment, stalking, and my kid's rapid descent into total instability. She verifies the teachers, pediatrician, and therapist will testify to what the kids had said and been through. They were too young to testify. Then says the harassment and stalking are harder to prove. At which point I showed her the 67 pages of screenshots where my exes so had detailed how thoroughly they had stalked my boys and I. She accused me of everything under the sun to get strangers to harass me, and how much she was enjoying that they were going to fuck that bitch's sanity. My lawyer laughed and told me we'd have a restraining order in 10 minutes and the hearing to support it would be a breeze. My ex's face went ghost white when all those printouts came out of a file and the judge. The plaintiff was being deposed in the lawsuit she filed alleging sexual discrimination. She was claiming her boss had made some inappropriate innuendos and overtures. The defense attorney asked her if when the alleged statements or events took place, was she shocked? No. Was she offended? No. Was she damaged in any way? No. So why exactly are we here? Well, honestly, I'd rather not be. Meanwhile, her attorney stared straight down, scribbling notes, doodling. We ended the deposition there and asked her attorney if this was going away now. We got a call later offering to settle for $1,000 and a letter of apology. My best guess is she was pressured by a friend or family to talk to an attorney and the lawyers ran with it without really talking to their client. Did you settle? My attorney had this moment in my initial consultation with him for my BWI charge. Yes, boating. The sheriff's department conducted the field sobriety tests on the deck of their small vessel in a heavily traveled waterway rather than taking me to dry land. Charges were thrown immediately out after my attorney brought this to the attention of the DA. Edit. I should add, this attorney was a sheriff's deputy on Marine Patrol for 12 years prior to going to law school. I interviewed 3 different attorneys and he was the last. The other 2 quoted me $3.5K for the defense. He said that he would never tell a client a case is a slam dunk, but he charged $700 and said he would see the case through trial if it didn't get dismissed with no additional fee. It was thrown out by the end of the week. Which SFSTs did they have you do? Normal, or the stupid boat ones? There are ones specifically made to be done on a boat, and they are hilarious. By your comment I'm assuming they did the normal version, but I'm curious. Deleted. 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 Unfortunately, reading the documents tend to be the hardest part of anything for most people. My grandfather was a small town Georgia lawyer and he told of a time he was representing an insurance company in a civil suit after a car accident. The plaintiff claimed to have received wapnick from the accident, supposedly caused by my grandfather's client. Pop asked him what exactly he meant by wapnick, and the plaintiff, wearing a neck brace, proceeded to answer, "It's when you can't move your head like this," and then he shook his head back and forth. The judge promptly dismissed the case. I knew the cops beat up my client and framed him. They described a knife in his possession that caused them to fear for their safety. Oddly, they never seized it. We won the criminal case and filed a civil rights case. While deposing one, he described the knife in detail. No more than 3 minutes later, he slipped up and claimed his partner told him my guy had a knife, but he never saw it himself. I told him, "That's not what you just said," and saw him panic. His lawyer panicked too and asked to see me outside. When we got in the hallway, I withdrew my settlement demand, and the case settled for a substantially larger amount within 45 minutes. Found on tax returns she had tens of thousands allocated to unreimbursed business expenses, including thousands of miles in vehicle travel. Her job was distributing the mail in a high-rise to the various suite. No driving involved in the job. Moments like this usually happen at bond hearings for me. It almost never fails. If the judge starts by saying something good for our side, he's going to deny bond 9 times out of 10. But if the judge starts by saying things like how these are some serious allegations and although he's not prejudging the case, there seem to have been some bad decisions made, etc., that's usually just the judge trying to put the fear of God in the defendant before granting bond so he'll behave while out on bond. Deleted. I had a client who was accused of taking a young woman's car and then crashing it fleeing the scene. The girl testified at trial that she had given him the keys that night because she was drunk and would never, ever drink and drive. Apparently she was not aware that I had requested and obtained a copy of her driving record which showed she received a DUI a month after the incident. I still remember the look on her face when I handed her driving record to her and said, "Except for that one time you got caught a month later, right?" The look on the judge's face was equally memorable. So I'm guessing her testimony was just not considered credible? What happened with your client? Deleted. That's fucking hilarious. My brother went to court to gain some custody rights of his daughter. Ex-wife says he shouldn't be allowed to be alone with the daughter cause he looks at porn. The judge, who happened to be a woman, laughed and said, "Honey, if every man who looked at porn wasn't allowed to see their children then there would be no child with a daddy in this world." Not a lawyer, but in small claims. Landlord wanted to renovate the unit with my security deposit. Asked him for receipts for the carpet he replaced, then showed the judge pictures of the unit listing with photos of hardwood floors. Man, I'm always too late, but I've got a good one. When I was interning at the criminal court for a judge, I observed a pre-trial hearing for a murder case. The defendant allegedly murdered his grandmother because she wouldn't give him money, then stuffed her in a closet and called a hooker for sex in the bed right next to the closet. Horrifying stuff. During the hearing, the defendant's lawyer, prosecutor, and judge went through some typical procedures. Then the judge asked the defendant if he had anything to add. The defendant smugly said, "Yes, actually, I don't think I'm mentally fit to stand trial according to Article X under the criminal procedure." The judge let him finish, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "The fact that you just told me this shows you're perfectly fit to stand trial." Not a lawyer, but I thought the story was funny. My mom got pulled over in my dad's truck. They wrote the ticket in my dad's name. Dad was at work an hour and a half away from where it occurred. Judge threw it out pretty quick. I was an attorney for an insurance company defending a lawsuit where the plaintiffs were two girls who claimed they were irreparably harmed and their lives would never be the same because severe back injuries kept them from being active. They forgot to set their Instagram accounts to private and the accounts were full of pictures of them riding jet skis, dancing, and pictures of them at the gym. The underage drinking pictures were just icing on the cake. Not a lawyer, but the judge had to tell my ex to sit down and stop talking in divorce court. My lawyer was pretty confident he had the upper hand after that. Ex had a lawyer, but she couldn't keep him contained in court. My ex showed up to court with no W-2s, no pay stubs, and claimed he didn't know how much he earned per hour, week, or year. The judge gave him the look of death and said, "Then I suppose I can set child support as high as I want and you'll never know the difference." Suddenly he remembered a lot of details after all. Deleted. Go beyond the ticket. Yikes, that dude went above and beyond. Deleted. I'm a DUI prosecutor. I was doing a DUI jury trial, alcohol. The trial had gone well and I expected we would probably get guilty verdicts. The defense attorney was all over the place. The officer had also found marijuana and a pipe with residue in the defendant's car, but we didn't want to bring it in because the defendant didn't appear to be impaired by the marijuana. We only had a blood alcohol test, and it could have been prejudicial and honestly just wasn't worth a headache to fight over it. In closing argument, in an attempt to call out the shoddy investigation of my officer, the defense attorney all but screamed, "And you know, the officer actually found marijuana in the car and he never bothered to test for it." For all he knew, my client could have been impaired by the marijuana, not the alcohol. In AZ, as in most states, you can be impaired by either alcohol or any drug. Even the judge broke the fourth wall for a moment and just stared at the defense attorney. It did not take the jury long to come back with a guilty verdict. Client was charged with assaulting his ex-girlfriend. Her story was that he nearly ran her off the road. He opened her door and started punching her. His story was the opposite, that she nearly ran him off the road and started punching him through his window. Us, so driver on left side. We get to trial and she describes all these injuries, but doesn't have any pictures of anything with her. I ask the stupid question, well, if you were so injured, where are the pictures on my phone? Fuck. She shows all the pictures, which shows bruises up and down her right arm, split knuckles on right hand, cuts on right wrist, etc. Nothing on her left side or face or body. I didn't take pictures of those injuries, she said. Hold it. Took the judge about 30 seconds to rule not guilty. The evidence supported my guy's story 100%. Former prosecutor here. We had a defendant on trial for DUI. We had already completed jury selection and one witness had testified when we broke for lunch. Our witness coordinator, who was sitting in the back of the courtroom, said she thought our defendant looked impaired during the morning proceedings, fumbling with her purse, falling asleep, etc. So we mentioned it to an officer who followed her out of the parking lot, straight to the liquor store a mile from the courthouse. She got back in her car 10 minutes and this time, when driving back to court, she was weaving and driving 15 below the speed limit, which was only 30 miles per hour, so already pretty slow. She didn't respond to the lights and just moseyed on into the parking lot, parked weird, and was eventually contacted. Jurors were coming back to the courthouse while officers had her perform roadside maneuvers. She was promptly as. Her attorney tried to cut a deal right there, but we politely declined and the judge declared a mistrial since the defendant could not be present to assist in her defense. TLDR, defendant in a DUI trial got arrested for DUI during a break. Okay, another custody trial. It's worthy to